Hello, everyone. It's Dank's dad here, back after a bit of a hiatus, but with good company. I've got Jeremy Ray from UVS Games here to talk with me about one of my favorite things in card games, draft. Jeremy, why don't you give yourself a bit of an introduction?
Yeah. My name is Jeremy Ray, as you already said. I am a senior game designer for UVS Games. I've also been a community member for long before I ever worked for the game. I've been playing for actually about 20 years now, through various eras and times. And yeah, now I'm on the other side of the ball, and uh, yeah, I don't really have much else to add there.
Awesome. Well, happy to have you chatting draft. So, you've been playing Universes for 20 years, which is quite a while. That's probably longer in total than I've been playing any card game, so kudos to you. But outside of universes and maybe for older universes, you can talk about this a bit as well. But what sort of limited formats have you played? Are there any particular that you remember fondly? And, on your card gaming journey, how have you drafted so far?
Yeah, I think I've always been a big time limited enjoyer. I have quite a few. The, Pretty much, if there's a limited in the game I have played, and I have played a lot of games, I would a participant of it. Like in the current days, I still do limited play and like for Magic and uh, Universus, obviously. Um, a little bit of I know my local stores will run limited for like Riftbound and Star Wars Unlimited, and I'll do even some of those. So there's in the present all of that, and then before that, my earliest serious card gamer memories were of the original Verse system by Upper Deck. Not the remake later, but the OG one, and that was kind of my bread and butter. They had like their own version of a Pro Tour, and you in order to get to day three or get into the higher prizings, the second day was always in draft, and that was usually where I had the most success for me as a player back then. So it's always been close to my heart.
That's pretty amazing. I know Versus is a game that many people remember fondly, but definitely is a bit before my time. So I don't actually have a lot of experience with that. So it's really cool, to hear positive things about the draft and not just the constructed portion as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you've touched Star Wars Unlimited at all,
Yes.
but it is a similar engine to the original Verse system. There's differences for sure, but there's a pretty similar set of DNA between those two game systems. So
Yeah.
you're probably a little more familiar with it, and probably a little more comfortable if you played it than you think.
Oh, well, that's great. I'll have to check it out. I know Star Wars Unlimited is actually one of my favorite games to do booster draft with right now. And it's been a great time. I know Magic has been on a bit of a hot streak too, so it's a good time to be a drafter, but the more sort of different outlets and like experiences you can have with it, the better in my mind.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, and some of those drafts do have like very similar sort of DNA. I like to say all the kind of draw one games in particular, or
Mm.
it's like a lot of like focus on getting card advantage and things like that. And then uh, stuff like our game has like a much different shape when you draft it.
Oh, absolutely. And I know for universes, I've worked on a cube myself. I still have yet to play Nick Reagan's, but sort of building for that and playing is just like for me, having done so much Magic, so much vintage cube there, drafting a lot of other games. Like I've done digital card games, so I've experimented with the limited formats of Hearthstone and Legends of Runeterra over the years as well. And they're all just so different. But yeah, I can imagine that, it must be really sort of challenging to have all of that sort of data in your mind as a designer and then having to kind of pivot to something like universes that is just so different.
Yeah, there is like it is funny. Just switching between card games in general. I am obviously I've been with Universes forever as a player, as an employee, as a play tester, everything. It is my first love, but I am a card game lover.
Mm.
I have standard decks or various format decks for at least a dozen different card games, including a bunch people probably have never heard of,
Mm-hmm.
sitting on my shelf behind me. I just I love the TCG space. I love the experience of playing people, and I think limited is one of the coolest ways to experience any of the games. And I think it's almost as interesting. Some games are very carefully designed for limited play. I think that that's very true about like Star Wars Unlimited, and obviously Magic spends a ton of effort and resources into having very draftable sets. But I think there's something to be interesting about the games that like approach draft in different angles or different things, or even have a little kind of loose parts, because those lead for unique experiences. Sometimes polished isn't always the only experience you can have with the sort of thing like this.
Oh, totally. And like I think like Cube is sort of the perfect encapsulation of this, where is like something like playing a turn one Black Lotus, a curated, really peak competitive gaming experience. No, but it is really fun to go Lotus Minx Skimbu or whichever crazy four drop you're going to play on turn one. It is a blast in Universus Cube to play 7 ally attacks with Kochi Koda on the second turn if your deck is able to perform and do it. And
Oh
even if
yeah.
yeah, and even if it's not, designed necessarily to be like necessarily, peak competitive per se, it still can be an awesome time to, just explore those rough edges.
Yeah, I think Nick Reagan has a pretty famous cube. I think
Yep.
we've even recently used it as like official side event material and things like that. But there's nothing like pulling a genuine 8 hand size 22 health character out of the cube and being like, oh my god, I'm so powerful. Like I could do anything.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that like that's one of the fun things about Universe's draft that I really like. I know one of the if you're viewing this at home, you'll see on my side I have the Izuku Midoriya from Jetburn as the splash here, and Jetburn is one of my favorite draft sets. And I feel just like with the characters there, you can take your deck in so many different directions. And some of the characters like Endeavor and Asui are, in my opinion, some of the best in the format, and their decks look pretty different. And then on the other side of it, you end up with a character like Hood, who just completely flips the script on what they are trying to do. And that strategy is still powerful, still very strong, and can be really fun if your direction takes you there in your draft.
Yeah, and Jetburn is. I'm sure I've said it before in one of these, but Jetburn was the most effort I think the team has been able to put into a limited format for any set ever. It was a huge focus for the testing time for that set. We
Mm-hmm.
had a little extra testing time during the development of that, and we took all that extra time and turned it um, into developing a draft format. And we even designed cards specifically with limited play in mind in a problem solving sort of way. As some people can coin them, the little kid attacks
Mm-hmm.
were all kind of designed for limited play, where they had, not necessarily, with a few exceptions, tons of incentives to see constructed play, but they were good tools to help close out games, which can be one of the pain points of limited formats in our games, where it gets into, as I like to say, the pool noodle fight, and nobody
Yes.
can quite win. So Jetburn had a lot of deliberate designs to avoid the pool noodle situation.
Mm. So that's really interesting. And I know that, sort of recently we've seen kind of a different take on that. Like with Reign of the Kaiju, we had the Cycle Lock foundations, as they've sort of been dubbed, where a lot of the one difficulty foundations exist to punish your opponent for cycling. We saw a lot of the Deadlock create a power token at that sort of uncommon rarity. I know, like going forward, I'm sure you're going to be mixing it up because you need to sort of balance what constructed needs versus what limited needs, and especially when it comes to a sealed or pre-release environment. But like, do you find that really challenging? Like, how do you sort of balance that out in design and testing? Because that's something that fascinates me.
It is. It's tough. Like, and here's the thing: is you when I started Godzilla Ranger Kaiju development, I was the lead designer for that set. Um, and I wasn't thinking about draft in kind of the big picture of the set initially because I had other goals in mind.
Mm.
Like, for example, I wanted to kind of like the power token mechanic was big on my head because I wanted a way to express these monsters using their stored up big energy and their big powerful abilities. And then there was also just like the thematics I wanted to get across of like this kind of larger than life world, big swings, big finishing blows, things like that. And so luckily those sorts of mechanics translate pretty well into limited play because like I said, I think our limited play depending on the kind of initial set design can hit a few different snags. That I don't want to zoom out too far, but like conceptually, when this game 20 years ago was made, draft was clearly not something they really had in mind at all in the initial designs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the game was very barely draftable at all, like in a legitimate way. You basically like you had to fudge lots of rules, and like some of those, like for people who have been around for maybe not 20 years, but maybe like 5 or 10, have even seen like we had like a face down foundation rule where you could play any card as a face down foundation for a long time. That
Mm-hmm.
was like Jasco era and well before Jasco era. Um, there was lots of little like hiccups, and so like towards the movement towards making the game more drafted and more draftable and more comfortable in limited play, like the things we had to do to make that more viable are things that maybe players don't notice. Like, um, you know, weighting the number of foundations in the set a little better to the number of attacks is one of those things
Yes.
where it's like we have to make sure players can draft enough foundations. And when the set is like 60% attacks or something, which was a thing that would happen in older sets at times, like it just you feel like you can't get enough foundations. And also just character availability, right? We shifted to the one character per pack. So instead of like hoping you hit a rare or ultra rare character in your packs or whatever, you will always have not just a character but a selection of characters to choose from.
Yes, and I know, going from sets like Undaunted Raid where or even like League of Villains is the one I think about where we would go through a pre-release and of the 6 people playing, it might be that 2 or 3 open characters, and that is just very different from what we have now, even though that was just such a short time ago.
Yeah, and it was a these were like the big picture problems that had to be sorted out. And then once you get into the specifics of set design, um, I'll talk about a set where we tried some things in the limited space because the set was a little different shape, and that was Guilty Gear.
Yes.
Um, so like in Guilty Gear, the rarity structure is that all your uncommons are usually attacks, and all your commons are usually foundations. Um, this was interesting because it solved pretty significantly the like I have to play every foundation I picked up problem. But it did kind of create a second thing where it's like, well, I don't have as much attack choice agency. I don't necessarily have to play all of my attacks, but I'm gonna have to play like almost all of them. Um, and see if that was like a better or worse experience for players. Is was part of the math for that product. And honestly, the draft for us is not a format we get a ton of feedback about from players. There's a few dedicated pockets of players who play and provide feedback, and I really appreciate those pockets of players because without their input, it would be even tougher. But a lot of the feedback is just like a smattering of comments in Facebook or Discord or whatever that like that's if that's what we get, that's what we're gonna have. Guilty Gear seemed to be pretty well received, so I think there's some stuff we can take from learning it. But like, not to ramble on too much about it, but Guilty Gear did have a little bit of the pool noodle problem because of how good tension is mechanically as a defensive mechanic. So like, unless you're playing a pretty specific variety of Guilty Gear characters, sometimes you play 2 characters who aren't offensively powerful in the Guilty Gear draft, and boy, they have a hard time killing each other.
Yeah, and like on the player side of that, like speaking to all your points, I love those rarities. I'm unabashedly pool of players who really cares about limited and gives feedback, and I was over the moon with that. I, as a draft player, I really do hope that that is something that comes back in the future. But understand that there are lots of different people that the team has to serve, and what's best for the most is right. But gosh, for draft, it was great. Tension though,
Yeah,
like
and I was going to say, I think you'll see some of those lessons applied, maybe not as universally as it was applied through Guilty Gear,
mhm,
but we definitely learned something. And even if it's just a math thing, right? Like maybe it doesn't have to be rarity locked, but you want a similar set of ratios. And I think
exactly.
that the ratios in Guilty Gear were they weren't quite 100% spot on where I would personally like to see them, but they were closer than a lot of other products we've done in the recent times.
Right. And tension was such a fascinating mechanic too, because we've seen the impact in constructed. It is very, very powerful. But ironically, like at least offensively, I don't think it scales the best with itself when you don't have the abundance of momentum outlets and other ways to use those tokens that you might have in a constructed deck. Like there's no
Yeah,
walk the dog coming down at the end of the day. There's no echo attack that's going to finish the string. Once you've used your first purple or your first red, that's all you get until your next turn. And could definitely make some of those attacks start to lose their luster when your strings had 3 to 4 of them in a sealed game.
yeah. I was always when I was doing like for Guilty Gear pre-release and then later drafts we did, I was always so aggressive with the carpool clear draw one on mine
Yes.
because I was just like, and I realized it's funny because I think if we had a longer tail end on draft engagement for Guilty Gear, I became very big on valuing every point of damage I could sneak in, even if it was a little reckless, because it was just uh if you weren't like Nago, it just every point of damage really counts.
Yes.
Nago can just randomly blow somebody up, but everyone else has to work a little harder.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know. I think at our pre-release, our final match came down to a Kai mirror, and
Oh yeah,
that was a real battle of attrition. Let me tell you, it was it was quite the fight.
yeah, and you can see in Reign of Kaiju, uh, I I've heard almost nothing about game ending issues. It seems like games with that set because of power tokens and as the community has dubbed them, cycle lock foundations, a name that I think is very clever. Where they're limited was a part of the math there, but also I think that there's um, a constructed mechanic sometimes just lines up really well with limited play, and I think power tokens are one of those where it's like, hey, a couple of cards randomly got me 3 or 4 power tokens, and you went shields down, so you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and I mean they were quite strong in that format and still are. I guess we're still playing this format right now, and I know Anguirus is quite the beast when he's got that lineup of power tokens, and that is the character I'm always hoping to open in my draft or in my sealed pool.
See, I love Ghidorah in limited. I
Mm-hmm.
love Ghidorah in general, but I love Ghidorah in limited. That sort of everyone else is trying to stash up for a 15 damage power token move, and I'm just like, you don't get to do that to me. We're gonna play honest 7 damage at a time, 5 damage at a time.
Yeah, Ghidorah is a sweet character. I know one of our local players has really been on the Ghidorah warpath, and Josh Adkins is in my local community, so we have seen a lot of combined firepower over the years, and we are still seeing a lot of combined firepower, and it's wonderful. I know.
Just when we thought we escaped,
No,
it returned.
we're never getting away. I mean, I was the person blocking with combined firepower, and I know Ghidorah, the second Ghidorah is a character that I am saving as my special treat because I know that I am going to go down the rabbit hole once I actually start playing him.
Yeah, it is one of the decks that I. Ghidorah is my favorite Godzilla kaiju. He has been forever. I just think he's the absolute coolest looking kaiju ever designed. Um, I have, uh, I've always have a King Ghidorah deck on deck. It was one for a long time. Obviously now it's two. I have a good King Ghidorah hot take, in that his best symbol is actually all and not death. So I don't
Mm.
get to play combined in my Ghidorah, but Bloodsucking Universe is a heck of a card. So
You don't have to convince me here. That's quite a good one. Uh, yeah, Universe is just awesome. I know I've seen actually your card slinging deck with all the Earthbreakers that can do it on all as well as death, and that was pretty fun to watch.
yeah, that is the deck I've continued to modify. I've gotten into a place now where I feel like it's an absolute buzzsaw of a deck, and that actually just plays really coherent defense and stuff too. It's a really fun deck. I think I wouldn't say underrated because people are certainly playing him, but I think most people have made up their minds about the death version being the best version because of combined, and I simply cannot agree.
Yeah, I mean it's they all offer a lot. I know personally I value Evil a lot. Ghidorah one on Evil is one of the characters I've probably played the most on my Universes journey, and like being able to have access to stuff like Team Doctor Ichigaki is absolutely massive. Your foundation base isn't quite what it used to be now that Incompatible Quirks is gone, but you still have good stuff. Ironically, for Death, I think the card that I value most highly is Koenma's Task in that version.
Very good.
Just being able to assemble your full arsenal of whatever attack you need and maybe make the crackback a little less punishing if it somehow doesn't work is, not nothing. That is definitely material, but yeah, all has some stuff. I've been playing a lot of characters on all with Fusion Chest Cannon, just trying to do that plus Big Fist Bash, and I think Ghidorah can play that combo very nicely.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm Fusion Just Cannon is my favorite. You play it and your opponent stares at their hand to make sure they have the right block zone card of all time.
Yes,
Every time you put it on the table, there's immediately like a hand check. They're like, okay, I'm good, or okay, I'm in a lot of trouble.
absolutely. And curse you! Look, we've gone talking about constructed for almost a
Yeah.
few seconds. What's happened? All right. So to move on a little bit, one thing I did want to bring up too is that I think it's really cool that we've seen some sealed store scrambles come about. I think that's a pretty nice way to make that event a bit more inclusive while also giving limited sort of a specific spot at the LGS level beyond just pre-release. Besides, the cube side events and on-demand draft, is there any chance that we might see draft maybe get something to the level that Hero 2 and Retro are now, if that demand is there a few years or a few months down the line?
It's kind of a like short answer yes, long answer maybe. And I say this because there's a lot of formats that are, how do I put this, loved by players in specific quantities. I guess
Yes,
this is kind of hard to
yes.
explain. Like there's a group of players who are adamant that Hero 2 is the best format we have, and I am not going to yuck those players yums or something. I think Hero 2 is great. I had a Hero 2 deck I was gunslinging with, but there's another subset of players who are all about retro, and another subset of players who are interested in you know, like I said, probably the smallest pocket. Unfortunately for my heart, not necessarily for reality, is the draft group. Who, um, there's definitely a couple of handfuls, especially like it's funny because they're kind of regionally localized to certain areas that really love draft, and we want to run more draft side events, but at the end of the day, organized play is going to keep running events for the stuff that gets the most players. And so far, Retro and Hero 2, in the early aughts of Hero 2, and then Retro, obviously, for a while now, are usually our two best performing side events that besides teams,
Mm-hmm.
which, teams has a long history in our game, and I'm glad to see that it's, every regional it seems to be getting a good show of attendance. But yeah, like I would love to see more draft. We tried to listen to the player base, and this is the hard part of the conversation where it's like I don't know if we have that much of a huge draft player base. I think that there is a not insignificant number of our players who think the best thing about playing our game is building their decks. They have hundreds of decks in whatever their deck builder of choice is, and when you cut that part out of the magic, it is a less enjoyable experience for them, and that's okay. But it does mean that I think we have a disproportionately large number of players like that in our community compared to most, and I think that's a testament to how cool our deck building is and how you can build Rodan as an aggro deck, as a mid range deck, as a control deck, like, and you could do that with technically every character of various effectiveness. It's a very open jungle of deck building in our game, and some people their favorite part is wading through that jungle.
Absolutely. And, I do remember when Yu Yu Hakusho had just come out. 2024 OP was in the conversation. And, I think we both remember probably what the player base reaction was to draft getting some rounds at regionals. And I think that there's some misconception, I think, in my opinion, that draft isn't competitive, but I do respect that some people, would choose to rather focus on the other parts of the games that they enjoy more or testing the skills that they more greatly value. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And, maybe with time people's minds will change, but I see where you're coming from and I'm with it. I get it, even though it's probably not the thing that is best for me, Dank's dad, which is sad, but
Yeah,
that's all right.
or me. I love limited play, and I think our limited play is like sneaky good, but it's it might not be the most popular thing with our community. That doesn't mean we're ever going to stop supporting it. Limited play is important. Pre-releases are super important, and there is enough. There's enough members of the community who enjoy draft for us to always at least put the effort in our set designs to make sure that draft can work and be functional and fun. But whether it gets that momentum as like a side event or even a main event, it's just going to depend on player engagement. And I think I had this conversation name drop a while back with another content creator, Mr. Cameron Cardwell. But there is something to be said about, and this is a reality that I will speak of as someone who's been here a long time. Draft wasn't always very fun in our game. It had moments where it was quirky and interesting, and sometimes okay. But the designing towards draft is a fairly modern thing in this game. We just put the character cards in the pack a few years ago now. Like drafting 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, wasn't the best experience. I don't know about 5, but 6 or 7 pre-COVID. Wasn't always the best experience. And I think that left kind of I think Tamron termed the word generational stink on the draft format, where some players just aren't interested in engaging with it because so many of our community members and communities are built out of players that have been around the community for a long time. And a lot of those players who have been around for a long time have generally experienced a draft format that wasn't that good. So why would they encourage their new players to try it when their personal experiences with it haven't been that great? I wish we would have pushed a little harder during the Jetburn release to get people to try draft again with a lot of the changes and concepts we've worked on and worked through to make it better, because we talked about earlier, but I think Jetburn is probably the best draft format we have ever had. I think there's other ones that are very good in this modern era. I've mentioned it a few times already, and I'm probably biased, but I think Reign of Kaiju is a great draft format. Games end in good windows. I think tons of the characters are viable. I think it has a lot of mechanics that play well in draft. So there's always room for us to keep making quality draft sets, and hopefully people will give it more of a run, give them more of a try with time, and maybe we get that kind of momentum to where draft gets a bigger role in organized play.
For sure. And I guess the question to piggyback on that, for those players who might still be on the fence or may still have those bad memories from the heyday, what sort of your pitch for why they should give draft a shot? Like, what's so fun about it?
I just think we have a truly unique draft experience where, like, in base, I not to to name names or call other games, but basically every other card game draft experience, it's like, all right, my best card are my 2-for-1s or my overstated weenie or units, creatures, whatever.
Yep.
And you can kind of adopt the same draft strategy for basically every other card game out there. Our game 2-for-1 isn't really a thing. Overstated attacks are great, but you know what's even better than an overstated attack? Like a Will Weenie attack that draws you a card, even though you draw a million cards anyways. Like the value evaluation changes completely. You need cards that end the game. You need cards that grease your attack strings. You need cards that help your consistency. It's a totally different evaluation process as a drafter, and it also opens up these cool doors since I rather like the symbol list or light symbol restriction formats in limited because it lets you do things you could never do in constructed.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
And that is one of my favorite parts too. I love that.
yeah, I think it's cool. Some people look at it as kind of a bug, not a feature, and I get that because it's like, oh, why doesn't your draft play exactly like your standard plays? You know, and it's like, well, our game with 12 symbols was always going to have issues making that translate smoothly. But I look at it a little bit like a feature and not a bug. Like, oh, like limited play is a truly different experience where I can do things I literally cannot do in constructed. I just think that's cool. Like, I love when you get a fury attack for a fury character like a Bakugo or whatever that he normally can't play, and it's just like a banger in him, and you're like, wait, this is awesome. Like, this
Yeah.
is my one chance to do this broken thing. Like, this is so cool.
Yes. And putting just two cards specifically, like the little combos you can assemble that just were not quite meant to go that way, is fun. Because like
Yeah,
CLU can be fully unlocked, but when you're playing it, it's like, wow, I can just play this Hunter's Ally and this Command Pigeon Flock in the same deck. And
yeah,
we are just going off. We are building all the allies. You can like the just the ability to mix and match and sort of design those different packages for each symbol is pretty awesome. And like another set, Girl Power, which I also think is really excellent for draft. Like I think that the way that you guys designed the ranged keyword in that set plays really, really well. And sort of those different pairs that you have across the symbols, and air kind of is the bridge over them all, but air good ranged and air void ranged look very, very different. But both of those are supported and are directions you can take your draft. And stuff like that I think is super cool, and we don't get to really see that in constructed.
yeah. And I will make the case too. Is I think pretty much every set past Jetburn has been like a fairly like between a good to great limited experience. Um, Again, depending is like on how you feel about a couple pool noodle fights in there. That's a really tough problem to fix for us on the design side sometimes.
Yeah.
But I still think those formats are okay. They're just like sometimes the games take a little too long, and I understand that pain very much.
Yeah. And personally, once again on the player side, I think that really the Attack on Titan sets are some of the ones where I think those differing priorities in terms of design kind of come in and I think make draft a little tougher. The sets still play pretty well, but like a lot of the backup cards, for example, I think are just a little bit difficult to make work. Where just the odds are not in your favor to assemble a Zeke War Chief deck that can play in a limited environment. And
Yeah,
and like Zeke's a successful design. Card sees constructed play, players like trying it, and it's done well at events. It's not like I don't think it was a mistake to make Zeke, but at the same time when you're, doing a draft for AOT3, it's just really tough to make him work. And I think like that sort of balance is hard, and I don't envy your position in having to figure out how to navigate that.
yeah. I think in every leader based game, there's going to be some of that pain. You had mentioned like Star Wars, and it's like some of the Star Wars leaders just are blank in limited also, and
Yes.
uh, we have that issue where some leaders it's just like characters in our instance, but uh, are going to really just not like unless you get very lucky, just probably not going to have the support pieces you'd like to have. I think it's funny because I think AO3 AOT3 Apocalypse in particular is actually like a pretty cool draft set, but you have to kind of ignore the backup characters because unless you pull like a ton of Jaegerists, you probably just aren't going to have that many backups. And I think what's interesting is the card pool outside of the backup characters for limited play is pretty cool. Like the Aaron and Armin and a bunch of other characters can do really interesting things. Warhammer Titan is like really
Yes.
cool in that format, actually.
Yes.
Um, so like I like AOT3, but you do kind of have to choose to ignore it. I actually think there's a. It's funny because it pushes me to another subject where I will be critical sometimes of just I guess our game engine when it comes to limited play, and it's something we work on, but it is tricky. Is sometimes there is a character whose just mechanics are really powerful in draft or limited, and it skews kind of the whole draft around them. I don't think there's been one too egregious in modern recent times, but like I think anyone who's around during like My Hero Set 3 remembers like Ojiro actually just running rampant on everybody for that whole format. And I know a lot of metas had a big issue with Muscular in League of Villains, who was
Mm-hmm.
just like definitely a limited beast. I think he was actually a pretty approachable limited beast. I think there's characters in that limited that compete with him just fine, but he did warp the whole limited play around him.
Yes.
Um, and you have to be kind of careful with designs like that, like very tanky five handers with like scaling mechanics or six handers with just really good output on their numbers
Mm-hmm.
are both like just big limited play threats in our game. So and but it doesn't mean we can't necessarily not design those characters. We just have to at times be considerate of how they're going to impact limited play. And it's funny. I've talked about this before, but um, like Godzilla King of Monsters, the original Godzilla from the Challenger deck, would have been a complete limited play nightmare in if he was in a booster set. He just would do everything you'd want to do in limited play.
Yes.
So it's the challengers give us space to kind of maybe pull some of those character designs away from places where they could impact draft and sealed play.
Definitely. And there are like even just looking at the characters coming from the Dark Hero decks that we're about to get.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I'd want to be squaring up against Tomura Shigaraki in a limited game. I would not like my odds. That
And all for one, 34 health, a lot of passive card advantage, lots of people throwing piddly unbuffed attacks to trigger his response. Like he would be really difficult to deal with.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had the good fortune to play a little bit with Titan of Terror in one of my pre-releases at Worlds this year. And boy, oh boy, just being able to snag that same great two check or rare attack or what have you over and over again and just make my opponent answer the question until they can't. And like All for One kind of has that same thing going on. And like that would be quite the power fantasy, but I don't know if it would be healthy
Yeah.
for limited.
It's funny in Rage of Kaiju though, because I even pre-errata Titan of Terror, I did not feel was the best character in Reign of Kaiju draft. I actually think that was it was probably Angerus.
Oh
But
yeah.
but Angerus can struggle with Mothra. Angerus can struggle with Gigan and Ghidorah. Like it like all those characters can find ways to win games. I think the one or two that you might like consider avoiding are like Destroya or something maybe. But if in a slower format, Destroya's ability gets really dangerous really fast. So I don't think there's any total whiffs there.
Oh yeah, I think that in Reign of Kaiju, Fire Rodan is probably the only character that is really tricky. Like in Sealed, which I've definitely played more of, just with how things are, that character is just really difficult to make work, just because he relies so much on synergies in your deck. Great character though, blast to play with, but just hard to make that deck come together. And I think
It, it
draft makes it.
it's funny,
Sorry, go right
but
ahead.
no, yeah, just that because there's cards that are kind of maybe not. fully designed for that specific reason of trying to help him. But a lot of his lower rarity cards were kind of designed with like, all right, how does he get activated in draft? So like his action sky dominance,
Right.
turning all the highs into active for his ability, or the Aeratune found Need for Speed. Is that what it's called?
Need for Destruction, or that's the evil one. Hmm.
The one that gives air attacks +1 speed. I can't think of the name for it right now.
Yes. Okay. That one is at rare though, is it not? Uh,
Oh, it
well,
might be.
but nevertheless though, like it's just those I think higher synergy characters where like characters like Zeke, who we mentioned before, are sort of the extreme example of this. But I think like Fire Rodan still falls along that spectrum of tougher to make work, but the juice is worth the squeeze if you can pull it off.
Yeah, that one you're gonna need a card or two to fall the right way, but like there's still merit, still six hand sizer who can put out a lot of stats. So if you do have the tools, it could be worth it.
Definitely. Well, anyway, I don't want to take too much of your time, but before we go, I would like to do a little crack a pack if you'd indulge me. So we're gonna open up a pack from my cube that I have built, and I'm just curious to see what your opinion is on what you take. So, just a little background for those of you who are viewing that might not have played. The cube has 15 cards per pack, one character, one asset or action, five attacks, and eight foundations. Two is the most common foundation difficulty in the cube, followed by one, followed by three, followed by zero. So the sort of accessibility of spam is a little bit less than in constructed, and this is sort of built this way to slow down the game a hair and also to really put the premium on those zeros and ones where in a singleton format you have to put a lot of them in just to make sure that the card density is where it needs to be. As for synergies and themes, you're going to be looking at Fury, Ally, Ranged, and Punch as the major synergies. And for minor synergies, we have Check, Hack, and Mill, Spells, Good and Earth five-hander is a bit of a synergy. You're going to see a few of those in here. And then the last one is tech cards. So cards with the tech keyword, not cards that have a specific function. So given all that information, let's see what we got. So first off, for our character, we have Inasa Yorashi. So how do we feel about Inasa?
I like Anasa. I think that speed always plays well in draft. Um, the re-ready can help close out the games kind of late. I don't know if it's a character I would consider a first pick character, but it's the kind of character who I would consider uh, using, especially if it came to me later in a draft.
For sure. And just another note for how this cube sort of works with the characters. Uh, you do not have to take your character out as your first card. I think that's a bit implicit. But you're only allowed to take one character per pack. And the only way you can get two is if you were to wheel a second. So everyone will have the opportunity to take at least one character, but if it's a character like Inasa where you find him interesting but don't want to prioritize him, you can just pick a different card and hope that he comes back on the wheel, or just go a different direction when that character presents themselves. So next up for our asset, we have Twisty Surroundings. Got some nice Breaker 2 terrain. What do you think about this? Is this on your radar as a card you'd first pick?
So yes, absolutely. I think the breaker two on face means it's never a dead draw, and its bottom response, the check hack, is actually like just so disruptive and limited. It's disruptive in constructed, but in limited, where people's builds are a little bit more substandard and things like that, I think Twisty is a high tier card pick. I wouldn't necessarily say it's my guaranteed pick because I do there's a few things in limited that I prioritize over like a high end disruption piece, but this would those things can be kind of uncommon. So this is definitely a high end choice in my opinion.
For sure. I'm with you there. I think that I've watched a few people draft this, and I think that this card definitely does not get picked as highly as that. But as the person who put it together, I agree with your reasoning, and I do think it kind of should be in that realm where, the first at least handful of picks out of a pack is where it probably ought to be going.
Yeah, this one is, if this is like, the fourth pack I see and it's still in there, there's no way it's getting past me.
Yeah. All right. Now we're into attacks, and this one we've got a bunch of five diffs. So first of those is I'm a Hero 2. This is the Breaker 2 Giro attack with that nice alternate win condition to win the game. And Giro 2 is in this cube, but this card has a lot of other things going for it that are pretty nice. So, thoughts on I'm a Hero 2?
Certainly not a first pick type of card, but it is certainly a pleasant mid pack pick. The breaker goes a long way. It's got decent base stats. Um,
Yep.
yeah, I no big notes. I'm a sucker for some breaker, especially again in limited, where it's like people are unlikely to have the constructed level counters for it that people will have. So it's usually like full effectiveness. It's basically stun two, which both helps you live, but it also helps you potentially kill them. So I would say upper mid tier sort of space.
Makes total sense. So, as our next attack, we have Gently Theft, another Jetburn card. This is the 4 mid 8 with Flash, where you can respond and discard a momentum to make your rival discard a card. And you also can deadlock response and make your rival remove a card from their hand. So, pretty punishing deadlock. And also of note, the taunt keyword is on this card if you happen to find Kami in your characters as well.
Yeah, this is a potential first pick in my opinion. The really high base damage, really strong lead in. Um, it doesn't ascend into that tier of an auto first pick for me, but I think in an average pack, this is a card that I would end up taking early. Just really low gate for really high effectiveness, and even if you don't have the discard online, like the momentum, it's still a flash four high for eight. Eight is a great limited damage number. You just never feel bad playing it.
I don't think eight's a damage number I feel bad about playing anywhere. Gently Theft is a beating of a card.
Yeah, overcurve stats, flash, so it's hard to interact with. Really dangerous deadlock, and then not a difficult high impact response as a lead in.
Nice. All right, so we've got Gently Theft and Twisty right now, sort of as our front runners. Next card up is Dark Shadow Emergence. This is a 2 mid for 5 with a 2 high block. Ally range slam with enhanced remove one foundation. If this is your first attack this turn, add an action from your discard pile to your hand. And first enhance if your character is committed, unflip one foundation.
Yeah, this is a situational high pick. Most of the time, this is probably just wheeling around. It has pretty poor base stats, if my mind serves me correctly. Um, but if you have like uh, a really powerful action you picked up, or something like through your wheel, or you're playing a character that commits itself for cost, I'm certainly not taking this early, and I might not be taking it at all. But as a synergy piece, it certainly could have homes.
Yes, definitely. And one thing that I've sort of liked about building out this cube is that there are a lot of like different levers you can pull in terms of balance where there are some characters who, well, they may be a bit more lackluster, sort of with their stats and in the constructed environment with the full card pool. Tokoyami 2 is one that comes to mind. And he's was not the best in his constructed time, but in this cube is an absolute beast just because ally is so deep and well supported. And if there's something you're trying to do with that character who looks a little below the curve, then the cards in your packs will meet the promise that that character can work. And I think it leads to some pretty fun games and fun deck building choices. So
Yeah, I was always a Tokiyami 2 enjoyer for what it's worth. I think that guy was maybe always a little better than people gave him credit for, but he existed in a pretty optimized meta for offense, and that was tough for him.
definitely. Speaking of pretty optimized offense, our next card is Repeated 100% Smash. Now,
Oh, that's
there's
a
a
good one.
there's a lot of text on this card, and I don't know if I need to read it for you. So, where is repeated going in this? Are
This
we?
is difficult. So it's if I have any other punches available to me, this is almost certainly a first pick. It's a little bit of a build around, but you don't necessarily like even playing it at face value is really good, largely because it has EX3 and Powerful 3. So as a finisher, it's just like even if you're not doing anything else, it turns itself into a 4 diff that has EX3 Powerful 3, which is just a really good way to kill somebody. Uh I don't necessarily by default think I would take it over gently, unless I know I'm going to have more punches.
Well,
So
you are likely to see it. Punches is one of the four major supported synergies. So,
yeah, I think that this is certainly in the highest tier of my first pick category. It in the sense where that uh 9 times out of 10 it's an automatic first choice. I like gently enough because of the deadlock and the ease of fit into certain decks that I'm not completely out on it yet. But I think this pushes Twisty out of contention entirely. I don't think I'm ever taking Twisty over this. So it'd be between gently or this.
all right. And personally, if it were me, I also think repeated is where I would be at as well. On top of all those other synergies you mentioned, it also is a ranged move as well, which does give it a little bit more utility even beyond the obvious punch synergies. And you have great punch characters in this cube. Paul Phoenix in particular can really shine with this and getting off some very strong turns. But Endeavor is no slouch either. So I'm very happy to see this if I'm opening my pack one. Last,
Yeah, this is likely. This is certainly a head of class type of first pick card.
definitely. And then our final attack here is Aura Slam. So this is our 5 diff, 3 mid for 5 throw from Yu Yu Hakusho. And if this attack is blocked, build the top card of your deck face down committed.
I, I think this is a really underrated card, and to be honest, if I was playing a character like a Hedora or something, like uh, I'm looking at this card very seriously.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I think I'm greedy, and I think I'm letting it go around because I think it's underrated, and I bet it'll come back.
Oh, for sure. And, there are some characters that really love this card. Like Spike comes to mind as one in this cube who can play it very, very well. And a lot
If
of,
I'm playing any meaty five hand or Grog or something, like I'm certainly aura slamming.
for sure. So, yeah, and, definitely has a home in many of my constructed decks. But repeated and gently theft are leading the way. But let's see what foundations we got. First up is Moth Monster, 2 diff, check to 6 from Godzilla. This can commit to give an attack -2 speed. And if you've taken damage from a rival attack this turn, it gets -3 instead.
Yeah, this is a card I feel good getting late in the pack, but I'm never taking it early. You can get -2 speed on a 1 diff. The 6 check is really nice though, and the block mod is really nice, and the -3 speed is not super difficult to turn on. So this is a card I will be taking from the pack if it's available, but I'm not necessarily taking it early.
For sure. So next up here, we've got a banned card. First one of those, we have Stronger in Darkness. 0
Oh,
difficulty, 3 high block as foundation. With enhance, if your character is committed, this attack gets +1 damage.
I mean, if I'm playing a character who commits themselves on their first attack of the turn, which there's a couple but not a ton of, then this is a real consideration because this card's broken.
Yes.
But this is probably just a card I take with my third or fourth pick because it's a 0 diff with a high block.
Yes.
That will sometimes give me a little bit of damage. There's almost certainly somebody else who could prioritize it higher depending on what character I'm on, but its priority depends significantly on what character you're playing.
For sure. And pack 1, that's really hard to know. But
Yeah, in the first pack, this is I'm still interested in taking this because this is zero diff, and so it's like a really low investment for a potential high reward.
Yes. And speaking of those zero diffs, we have this is a great pack. There's multiple zero diffs in here, so you are eating good. We have tight lipped. So
Oh, this card's crazy.
yeah, tight lipped is a nutty card. You can just flip foundations for damage and can really get the job done. Plus, I mentioned Spike before, but there are a few characters that really do value those face down. So where does tight
Plus one, plus one mid block.
Yeah, yeah,
That is a huge feature of this card.
yes.
Zero diff, 5 check, plus one mid block. Good in hand is a defensive tool. Good on the board is a game ending tool. I put a pretty huge priority. I'm not taking this before one of those two big attacks still, but unless both of them get around or something, this is probably my second pick. It's competing with Twisty, and I might take it over Twisty just because it's so versatile as both an offensive tool and a surprisingly useful defensive tool just because of the block mod quality.
Interesting. So for me, at least, I think tight lipped would actually be the card I were on if this is my pack. And just having that zero, like the versatile zero diff is so good. But like getting any zero is great, but having one with relevant text that is a good hand trick, like, is something I value really highly. But this is not a cube that people have sunk thousands of games into, so who knows who's right. But like clearly,
Well,
different play styles
yeah,
can work
and
out.
depends on what you're playing too, right? Like
Right.
while it's never, you can't go wrong with damage. Your deck might be taxing your foundation base anyways with flips, things like that. So you do have to be cognizant of like a blank 0/5 plus one mid block is still a pretty good card, but it isn't like first pick material to me. But it is most of the time it is an incredibly high tier pick.
For sure. All right. Next up, we've got the final zero diff in the pack. We have acrobatic. So this one, after you block with it, you can remove it and you can destroy to give an attack -1 speed, playable while committed, and of course, 2 mid block.
This one's fine. I'm not sad to take it, but it is clearly a tier below the two in front of it. Not an off zone block to compare with stronger, worse block than tight lipped, and honestly a slightly less useful ability. Still a good card and still a great card in limited, but the other two zero diffs outclass it a little bit.
For sure. And that's when I would definitely, let slide to take something like repeated, where, that high ceiling, especially in a pack one, pick one situation, is possible to attain. And like acrobatic is great, but there is a limit to what a zero diff can do that doesn't have tons of relevant text in every position like tight lip does. So next card is toughest punk in junior high. 2 difficulty, 3 mid block with response flip. Before you take damage from an attack, reduce the damage you would take by 3.
Yeah, if I'm a six-hander, I'm considering this with a middle pick, and if I'm a seven-hander, I might not take it at all, or unless it was a last pick. It's probably not making my list as a seven-hander. I don't want to be tanking attacks this way if I can avoid it. But as a six or five-hander, I love a little defense from stage, so it's not a card I'm taking early, but it's not a card I'm sad to take late.
Definitely. And I think that really, if unless you are like pretty solidly in that kind of beefy earth five-hander archetype, I feel like it's really hard to just latch onto this one quickly.
Yeah, if you think of it as like I can flip to block half of an attack, it's like okay, would you, like it's not a terrible rate, but there's if I only have 20 21 health or whatever, that's not math I'm interested in at all. So
For sure. All right. Next, we have Heroic Lineage, another MHA staple. 2 difficulty, 3 low block. Commit after your rival's attack receives a damage bonus, it gets -3 speed. Or commit after your attack receives a speed bonus, it gets +2 damage.
so this one is both close to my own personal heart. My hero 2 deck is Ida, who is my favorite My Hero character. Um, this card is so good and limited.
Yes.
People will be putting damage on things. A card that flips two-way between defensive and offensive at good rates on both sides and has a low block. This is a killer card. It's not first pick killer, but it is tight lipped tier to me in the foundation base. Like this and tight lipped are the two best foundations in this pack so far, and I would be happy to get either of them. I just for me, like you can't win the game without cards that can function as good kill conditions. So I'm never gonna pass up like a repeated or a gently.
For sure. Alrighty. We have two foundations left here. Two more, two diffs that block low. Funnily enough, we have an unexpected hero. So, two diff, three low block, just like Heroic Lineage. Response commit. After your rival discards a card during the combat phase, draw one card. And enhanced flip. This attack gets -3 speed and +3 damage. How are we on?
Funny,
Go ahead.
never taken this before gently theft, but if I get gently theft and I get this, I feel really good about it.
Oh, definitely. That's a sick little combo.
But yeah, this card started seeing some constructed play towards the end of its life, actually, and it was good because if you're gonna block anyways, the damage pump doesn't matter, and then if your opponent shields down, it turns into damage just outright. And low blocks always like in cubes it can be a little different based on block distribution, but generally speaking, a low block's always something you're looking to get a couple extra of. So.
Totally. And I think all Rodan played this card better than anybody. But the days of that all Rodan are gone, but character might be back. Who knows? Then our last card here, two diff, three low block, Childhood Friends. So this is the unique discard the discard the top two cards of your deck. After your powerful attack is blocked, gain 1 health and your rival loses 1 health. Or response flip. At the start of your end phase, add one attack that matches 2 or more symbols with your starting character from your card pool to your hand.
Underrated card, I think, in its time for constructed play. Tough limited card. You don't know how well your cards are going to symbol match for the bottom ability. You don't know how much powerful you're going to have for the top ability. Definitely not putting a huge priority on this, especially in the first pack. As like a pack 3 card, it could move up significantly in the value bill where you're like, oh wow, I have randomly 8 powerful attacks or something. And it's like, okay, well, this thing's gonna do 3 or 4 damage. That's pretty good. But the pack 1 math for this card doesn't math for me, unfortunately.
For sure. And it's definitely one of those cards that in my mind is not particularly great at one thing, but a lot of decks are going to be interested in at least one piece of this card, be it the ally keyword, be it the mill, be it the incidental damage for your powerful attacks, or being able to pick up a card from your card pool. Like I think that like most decks will at least want one of those, and like this is a card though that I really only want to pick if my deck is able to do 2 or more of that. Then I'm like really actually looking to get this mid pack, sort of like you're describing.
Yeah, like I said, in a later pack or towards the end of a pack where things are starting to shape up, it could start to become a much more interesting card, or it can become a card where you're like, boy, I really don't want this. I have nothing that synergizes here.
All right, and with that, we've seen all of the cards. So I think here we have you on repeated 100% smash. Is that your pack 1 pick 1 out of this guy?
Yeah, it's impossible. It's really it's the keywords. EX2 powerful 3 means that when I need to dump 2 or 3 momentum, it can turn into a kill condition. It functionally plays on a 4 diff, and that number gets lower for every punch that I can pair it with. It's a great string ender, which I think are rare in draft at times. It's very. I value a string ender a little bit more than I value a string opener because good openers come in a lot of different shapes. They can draw you cards, they could stun your opponent, they could disrupt your opponent in other ways, like Gently does. But like a good string ender needs a couple specific things. It needs to be affordable to play late in a string, and it needs to be able to effectively punish your opponent for however much tax you put on their defenses up to this point. And Repeated is just a premium card in that space.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it is pretty priced in as one of the best incentives to try to make that sort of punch package happen, at least in this card pool.
Oh yeah, if this is pack one, pick one. I'm just forcing punches for the rest of this, and I'm gonna, you know, I will say I would still, because you're not like hard coded into it. I would still value attack's overall power over just being a punch necessarily for some of my picks. But if I can get just like half of my attack lineup as punches, I'm gonna feel really good about it.
Oh, absolutely. And the power level and the synergies for this are such that in a draft environment, I think that you will probably be splashing a few non punches, but you're going to have a pretty stacked lineup for this card.
Yeah, and that just sounds like a good time. That uh, I I think in my own personal sort of draft tier list, um, the things that rate like first pick worthy for me are usually high quality openers, high quality card advantage, or high quality finishers. Um, Anything in one of those three categories is like a first pick worthy consideration for me. And then like right below that is like disruption, like grease and glue pieces, things like that. And then just also like tier two is just like any spams with off zone blocks are kind of valuable in draft, and sometimes one that you don't have synergy with, but it has like a +2 high block is just the right card.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I tend to weight things, and I'm not afraid to pick like a twisty surroundings first, but I'm certainly not going to skip over a high quality opener or a high quality finisher.
For sure. And, like it's interesting though to talk heuristics because I feel like it's so contextual depending on the environment that you're drafting in and what sort of rules you're playing with. So, like, if I were, in a jet burn draft, I think that I would be picking high impact, low difficulty foundations at a premium above all else. Like you could give me a Falling Skies pack one pick one, and I would be passing it for number 10 pro hero. And
Yeah,
like
that's crazy. That's a
it,
crazy thing you just said.
it sounds very crazy, but I would stand by it. But I firmly believe that my win rate is higher if I'm doing that. And as like you move through the sets further in time and that sort of context evolves, like in a set like Reign of the Kaiju, for example, I I don't think there's any spam that I'm going to be taking over the high impact attacks that are going to be closing out games like you're saying. But like it's so hard to, figure out what that context is at least until you've sort of settled into that limited environment and gotten to play. And it's definitely a good sort of kind of litmus test for you as a player to sort of see where your head's at, what you're prioritizing, and how that evolves as you play and learn more.
Yeah, no, and I think that is like it's funny you say that, but like there's a couple spams I would first pick from Kaiju. Divine Defender
Yeah,
comes to mind as one that I would pick very high, and but even like Defiant Roar, the commit a power token to draw. Like if
yeah.
I'm on a power token character, I'm taking that card awfully early.
Oh, for sure. And, like one thing that this cube doesn't explore as much that I think is fascinating is how Attune sort of plays into things. Where you have a card like Defiant Roar that is great, but you can only play that on Earth symbol characters. And, like that is actually like a much more like formidable restriction in draft than it might appear because you take any three symbol foundation and you're pretty likely to be able to play that on 60 to 70% of characters depending on which symbols are in the set, how they pair, etc. But if you look at something like Defiant Roar, it's pretty tricky because you have to be on Titan of Terror, Anguirus, Hedora, Biollante, and because that's it, right? No other Earth characters that I'm forgetting.
Burning,
Burning Godzilla,
but
of course, yes. So,
but yeah, I think that's all.
so yeah, it's like you are, I think, around a third then to be able to play the card, and that is, like drafting Magic. It's kind of like taking a multicolored card, but
Oh yeah,
it's sort of cool because your brain looks and sees one symbol and it's the opposite where like in the other game you might play it's the same sort of meaning as multiple pips, just presented differently. And
Yeah, you have to kind of like bend your brain a little when you're kind of like drafting with a tune in mind. When you're like, okay, if I haven't already picked my character, what if this character were to come, would I take it and play it? Like, would I pivot to it? And if so, then this card might make sense. But it definitely like makes you kind of have to think a little bit further out when you're uh especially in a set with like mixed attune and regular multi symbols like random kaiju. Before you take an attune card, you kind of have to zoom out and go, okay, will I be on a character that would use this card?
right. And like when I'm prepping for a draft set for me, one thing that I'm looking at a lot is like different symbol pairs. So to sort of see like if I'm trying to like pick cards, one thing that I do is I try to pick cards that share like one symbol or two symbols, and trying to figure out how many characters I have as a jumping off point to hit. Because in Universus draft as it stands, you get the characters you open in your pack. So sometimes if you see a character pack one that you're not really interested in playing, you have to figure out how to maximize your odds of sort of finding an exit for your strategy that can actually work, and look toward maybe like which of these two symbol pairs can I go toward, or can I like construct the pool of cards that I'm picking in such a way that I'm likely to find a character I'm happy with that can play these cards and win with them, because that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day. And it's a really fun problem solving sort of experience that I don't think I get in draft in any other sort of game.
Yeah, I can't stress. I think there's something really cool about how unique Universus is both as a draft game, just generally speaking, because it's a pretty unique game engine, but also just as a drafting experience where card evaluation is just totally different. Like there is no removal spells. There is no obvious 2-for-1s, and you can't just take 100, like tricky tech cards because you got to win the game at some point. So sometimes you might just have to take like the meaty card that does 9 that is not really that good for you otherwise. Like just to kind of get there, you have to really like it's funny there's people a long time ago who used to count like the total damage of their attacks. Like a good draft deck had to have at least 50 I can't remember, I think 50 total damage was the number.
Mm-hmm.
Uh this was like a long time ago, and it was like because if you didn't have 50 total damage in your attack lineup, then you know, like assuming your opponent blocked 20 of it, you'd win with 30 of it. I don't know how well that math holds up in modern times because, there's a lot more factors to that. But I always thought it was like an interesting exercise where it's like, think about how these people are evaluating their draft pools and trying to get stronger drafts. Our game has completely unique ways about it. No one's counting the total power of their creatures in a Magic draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's true. Like it's really hard, like because like if you're playing like one of the draw one games, like you're saying, right? Like there's some concept of like what kind of value a 3/4 will, like a 3/4 creature will provide you over a game. And like a 4/6 attack is a lot more nebulous in terms of what it's going to do for you. And like if you're trying to apply those other card game heuristics, you end up with, well, it's a burn spell, but sort of not, because they're going to counter it a lot. But you can also improve it, but sometimes you can't. And sometimes they can make it worse. And all of those things together just make it much more challenging to really figure out what a good quote curve looks like, where your cards need to be. And I think that there's a lot of like skill expression in players who can figure that out, plan ahead, and end up with a deck that on top of just being able to deploy the rate it needs, also is able to take advantages of the synergies from the set and really go off. Like it's just really fun, and I'm glad you got to come on here and talk about this with me. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you, man. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for pitching the subject of something that I truly love. Like I always I come from a community of a mixture of newer and older players, and like There's very largely differing opinions on limited play. I've always really loved it. I've always been kind of passionate about it, and even when it was like not being designed for, I thought it was like a little underrated because it provided such a unique experience. And now that like as a design team, we know a little better how to build these things out. I think basically every set is draftable, and I think if people who like limited play in other games put the time in to draft our game, there's a good chance they would like it. Everything, nothing is perfect. One of my best friends is Keith Disbro, and he just doesn't like draft in any game, and I don't, I don't fault him for that. But if you have a base where like you enjoy unique and interesting drafts in other games, like I think there is something to get out of this. So maybe give it a try.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you for the time, Jeremy. You are the man for taking some time out of your schedule to chat with me in the community, and we love you, dude. Thanks again.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
All right, awesome. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.